Women's Week in Provincetown is an epic annual event.
And Wing Women Weekend is going to make it even epicer.
It's not a word, Barb, epicer.
Epicist. Delicious. I don't know. What do I look like? A worditarian? All I know is that Wing Women Weekend is going to be the event of 2024.
Yep, October 16th through 20th is when we are going to Provincetown, one of America's gayest communities, for learning, fun, friendship, and community. Barb and I are later in life and divorce experts, but this event is for everyone. For those who are just beginning to consider their sexuality, to those who have come out years ago.
There's tons of amazing activities available for queer women of all kinds taking place. Everything from tea dances to whale watching, and you can partake in that with your new group of gay besties, aka your Wing Women.
And we assembled some incredible experts to lead workshops on things like lesbian dating, lesbian couples workshops, business adventure, and more. And all of these women, except for one, are later in life lesbians.
So let us be your co-pilots as we enjoy some fantastic activities together designed for queer women of all kinds and for all ages.
Think of it as summer camp, but for grown women and gayer. You'll make friends and have experiences unlike any other, and you'll have us as your wing women.
Early bird pricing ends August 7th, so register with the coupon code EARLYBIRD to save. Sign up at www.wingwomenweekend.com. That's wingwomenweekend.com.
Hey queer friends, are you ready to be inspired? Welcome to Season 5 of Coming Out and Beyond, a podcast that shares stories from the LGBTQIA+ community. Here's your host, Anne-Marie Zanzal.
So you're in the process of coming out later in life, and you may be listening to this podcast and looking out for other people who talk about coming out later in life, yet you still don't seek support. Well, my guest today, Emily Bettdur, is a late in life lesbian coach, just like I am. She specializes in supporting women who discovers their sexuality in their later in life. She had a transformative journey as a late in life lesbian, and she combines her personal experience with professional expertise to offer empathetic guidance and community. She was married to a man for 11 years, and coming out as a lesbian, she understands the unique challenges faced by women navigating this complex process. Emily supports women by offering one-on-one coaching and is the founder of the Late Life Lesbian Community, a space dedicated to providing tailored support, expert resources, and a network of understanding women. Her mission is to empower women to embrace their true selves with confidence and clarity, while fostering a supportive environment that enhances mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. This is great.
It is great. And so Emily's going to share her story, but we're going to share some reasons today of why you should seek support, because both Emily and I did that in our own journey. And we really want you to find the support and the resources that you need, because you do not have to do this alone. And so many times people try to do this alone without talking to anybody, right, Emily? We see it time and time again.
Yeah. So hard to do that all by yourself. So
it is.
And just to know that there is actual support available for this. I think that was even what I went through, was not even realizing, and maybe even at the time, because that was over 6 years ago now, just very limited support options, but there is actually specialized support out there for this now, and it helps. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you your story, but let's go back to that specialized support. So Emily, I start every podcast by saying, tell me your story. So tell me your story.
Okay. Well, how far back you want me to go? No.
Tell me your queer story.
Okay. Well, I mean, it
Okay.
starts with, I think this leads in and is an important part of my queer story because I think a lot of women experience this as well. I grew up in a Catholic conservative family, going to church all the time. You know, I was a good kid, straight A student, yeah, just did all the things that I was supposed to do, including, meeting a guy, falling in love, getting married, having kids, a kid. I only have one kid, but did all the things that I was supposed to do. And honestly, at this time, never really even gave a thought to, my sexuality. It was just sort of an assumed and a known that for me, like that I was straight or should be straight. I never even questioned that. But what's interesting is my ex-husband was actually the first person in my life that recognized my interest in women. Apparently, when we were dating, I would comment on women a lot. And I was under the mindset thinking I'm just a cool girlfriend who can appreciate an attractive woman and, point them out to him thinking, he would probably enjoy it as well. Huge signs that like, but he picked up on this. And even before we ever even got married, he said, I kind of think you might like women more than you realize. And I denied it and was just like, oh, no, 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 kind of, shrugged it off. But he was the one that said, and this sort of led down the bi route. Like some women are interested in both men and women, and that's okay. And so him saying that, and I honestly don't even know if he remembers this conversation, but it was pivotal, for me. And that kind of put the curiosity, like the question that I guess would probably be my catalyst moment, that it started making me wonder and question, well, do I actually maybe like women more than I realized? And that led me to realizing that I did. And so that I guess I went from, but this whole time too, it was my boyfriend at the time, but we're planning our lives and talking about marriage and all of the things. And we're going again through all of those motions of all the things you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
But yeah. But that led to, for me, I would say I went from like a bi curiosity, like, oh, I'm just curious about women, to, since my ex-husband at the time was aware of all of this, we explored in our marriage and our relationship. And, so I did have experiences with women while I was married, so that sort of confirmed me going, okay, well, I think I'm bisexual because I still had this man that I felt that I like loved and had built this life with. To over time, we did sort of open up our marriage more and experiment with some things like that. And that is what led to the end of our marriage, that created a realization of, no, I've realized I truly do just want to be with a woman, and that, we've done all of these things again due to sort of my sexuality, and that realization of knowing that was never going to go away. And that realization that ultimately, if it was my choice, I would prefer to be with a woman over a man, was what led us to make the decision to get divorced. And so,
And when you say choice, you mean choice about bisexuality, like in the sense of not that you're making a choice to be gay. The choice was,
oh yeah,
yeah, the
no,
choice was
no.
that you, if you were living in a bisexual context, you would prefer
Mhm.
with women versus with men.
Yeah, well, and that's what led me to, I mean, now I identify as just of being a lesbian. Like
Mhm.
I have but it was, yeah, in the context of my marriage, it
Yes.
was this, I had felt like I was bi for a really long time, but then that's that realization of, for me, which maybe this is helpful too. Like for me, I realized that if I was going to be with somebody, I would be 100% happy, satisfied, content, never even think about a man if I was like with a woman. But if I were to be with a man, I would always be wondering and questioning and fantasizing and thinking about being with a woman. And so for me, that was sort of that defining factor of, no, I believe I would just be a lesbian, because I truly have no desire to ever be with a man again. I don't think about it. I don't miss it. I don't crave it. I don't, but with
Mhm.
the opposite was if I was with a man, wouldn't you want to be with a man? No, but if I was, I would still just always want to be with a woman. And so that to me was a huge sign of I'm not in the right place. Like I shouldn't be married to a man because this man is not what satisfies and fulfills me, and I shouldn't be in a relationship with somebody where I'm wanting something else. Like that's not fair to either
That's not
person.
fair to him as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
How long from like you first thinking, okay, maybe I'm bi, to when you realized, oh, it's more than that. I mean, I know a lot of times it's years.
It was. I mean, and it was just this slow process. I mean, I was married to him for 11 years, and he pointed out this, like, put sort of, pointed out that sexuality piece even when we were still dating. I mean, I would probably say it was at least a 10-year unraveling, unfolding process of trying to figure all of that out. And it
Yeah,
to me it's yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go
Um,
ahead.
it's really interesting to me because the first time like I ever realized that I could get off the straight train, it took me 10 years to
Mhm.
really get to the point where I actually came out.
Mhm.
And because I had like I mean I went to lots of therapists, I did couples counseling, I did everything to try to find peace and contentment.
Yeah,
Really
yeah.
what it was. My ex-husband and I, and a lot of us have ex-husbands that are fine. They're okay.
Mhm.
They're, I feel very sorry for the women that have really horrible ex-husbands and
Yeah,
stuff like
I
that.
yeah, agreed.
But when I was married to my ex-husband, we had a very good friendship,
Mhm.
but I didn't know it was just a friendship
Mhm.
because it was our normal. So we had a great friendship. I hear this all the time. Oh, my husband's my best friend, blah, all that stuff like that. We should be so much more than best friends with our partner.
Mhm.
And like now that I've been married to a woman and Emily is too, um, it's just like until you experience, it's really hard to describe.
Mhm.
But like my wife is my friend, but she's also she's my partner.
Mhm.
And more specifically, she's my lover too.
Mhm.
And it's interesting, like 8 years in, I still want to have sex with her. While when
Mhm.
I was married, I was like, oh, I guess it's been a month. It's time we should probably have sex.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was married to a man, every woman, all of us are married to different kinds of men. And some of us marry men who really want to have sex all the time.
Mhm.
And when you're not straight and you have a spouse, that it often provides a lot of conflict in marriages.
Mhm.
I hear
I'll
this
sh
time and time again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was like, I'll share this because I feel like I'm a little different, which is interesting, but go with me on this. In my marriage to a man, I was the one that wanted sex more. But
Mhm.
I believe now that that was a way to try and feel close, to try and feel connected. It was sort of a validation for me of being like wanted or desired. Like I always crave to feel wanted and desired. And so I think that that was a way to try to connect with this person who's, my spouse on a deeper, more intimate level, but still also just never feeling like that really deep connection, and like always feeling like something is missing. So, yeah.
Well, actually, I could say the same thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, my ex was not particularly interested in sex.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and also really didn't notice me too much
Mhm.
as a
Mhm.
girl,
Mhm. Yeah.
He noticed me as the mother of his children and stuff like that, but he didn't really notice like my, as a girl,
Mhm.
while my wife does all the time.
Yeah. Same.
Um, and it was really interesting because I didn't want to have sex because I thought we should have because I mean sometimes I was horny, yes, of course. Usually
Mhm.
with
Yeah.
2 or 3 drinks in.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
that's when I got horny. Um, But but the thing is I was like, we don't have a healthy marriage. I mean, we're not having sex.
Mm,
And also probably somewhere in the, we were married 27 years. So probably somewhere around year 15 or 16, he started sleeping in another room because he snored
mm,
so bad. It kept me up. And
mhm.
so, but he would have stayed there the rest of his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
He really would have, and, I'm like, "I don't want this. I don't wanna not sleep with my partner." We had very separate lives. He would go to bed before me. Sometimes he'd go to bed
Mhm.
without even saying goodnight. So I'm like, where is he?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, I knew, like, this was the end of our relationship, like, my 9 or 10 year, 9th or 10th year of, you know, pondering,
Mhm.
this, and, that's when I knew I had to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I also heard this famous line, which I know you've heard, is straight girls don't lie awake at night wondering if they're gay.
Yep.
And when I heard that, Emily, that was what changed everything for me.
Mhm.
And then I had a client who I love. She didn't believe me, so she went and asked all her straight friends if they laid
Yep.
awake. I went, and they said no.
Yeah.
She was like,
Yep.
"What?"
Oh, I've done that too. I have some very, very straight friends. And if I'm ever like questioning or thinking something, I'll be like, do you ever think about this? Or does this ever happen to you? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, yep, that's, means I'm gay. Yeah. So,
So, would you like to share any more of your story before we move on to our topic today? I mean,
yeah.
you decided to leave, you decided that.
Yeah.
How was your husband with all of that? Was he like, "Yeah, I think it's time"?
He definitely understood. Yeah. So part of that story is, at the time, like I said, like the sort of opening up our marriage was what led to the end of it. We were sort of involved with another couple,
Mhm.
and him and the girl actually had developed feelings for each other. They aren't together, and that didn't work out. But so he ended up sharing that with me, but, we had gotten involved with other couples and done all of this. I would take ownership of that. I would say the only reason we were doing that was due to my sexuality because I wanted it. And it was sort of this have your cake and eat it too thing. Like, okay, I've got my husband, but this is sort of this loophole of like trying to fill this other need that's there. Um, so it was again like kind of a conversation and he told me, he goes, well, if we're figuring this out, he's like, we're kind of at this point where he was like, if we're going to focus on us and like our marriage, he's like, it just has to be you and I. Like, there can't be more of this, opening things up. And I understood that. He goes, but you need to figure out you. He was like, you need to figure out what it is that you want. So we sort of, I don't know, you could say had a hall pass or whatever. He was like, I'm just going to say you take time, like let's consider us like on a separation. He goes, do what you need to do, date somebody, whatever you need to do to figure out what it is that you truly want. So very thankful for him to be that rational about all of it. But I felt the same way. I was like, well, if you're into this other woman,
Mhm.
then you also really need to figure out how you feel about her. I was like, because I also don't want to fight for our marriage and then you're like, well, I actually really just want to be with somebody else who's not you. So we were kind of at this crossroads, and but I went with it because I was like, I feel like it's important. So I created a dating profile on a dating app and I connected with somebody, and I was honest, but we went on a date and it was with a woman, and it took one date. It was a one date, like actual real official date with a woman. And I was just like, this is it. Like this is what I want. This feels right. Like this is like what's missing in my life. Like this and so I came back and I told him, I just said, I just said I went on this date and I said I want to be with a woman. And yeah, and so we made that decision. We're like, okay, well, which made sense. We thankfully are both very logical, rational people. So while there was a bunch of emotion, while it's always hard to navigate that, and there's the grief of, mourning the loss of the life and the relationship that we had together and that we had built, we both were thankfully very logical, and he understood that too. He was like, okay, well, if you want to be with a woman, I'm not ever going to be with a woman. So yeah, basically, why would we continue on in this marriage? And I felt the same way. I'm like, yeah, I can't give you what you want, and I'm always going to be pulled towards something else. And I was like, I don't want to carry on in a marriage where that's the case. And I was like, I don't want this to lead to bitterness and resentment and animosity, because if we're both just trying to keep going with this to for what image it or appearances, or because it's, what society has told us we're supposed to do, I was like, I don't want to end up like hating you, and I don't want you to hate me. And yeah, so we decided just to get divorced, and it was a very all of this honest this all happened very quickly. It was like he kind of told me his feelings of how he felt about this woman, and we kind of had this separation like in March. I dated like in April, I think end of April. I knew that I wanted to be with a woman. So May we were selling our house. I mean, like we all of this from like March to like July, and it was done. And we
Wow.
were divorced, and we were moved
What
into two
state were
separate
you in?
houses. Yeah,
What,
what?
what state were you in?
Missouri.
Oh, some states it's much harder to get divorced.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Ours was an amicable divorce. There was nothing that was contested. We did it very easy, and then we only have like a 30-day process from the time that you file, and then that they'll sign off on it. They only require 30 days. But yes, I have learned that some states are like you have to have a year separation and then
That's a
go through
lot.
all this stuff. So yeah, it was
I know a lot about divorce now, and so 30 days,
yeah,
that's why I said, where were you married? What
yeah,
state were you in?
very
Yes, that's
fast.
unusual.
Yeah.
It's really interesting, your story about how you and your husband separated,
Mm,
um, is a little bit unusual because
mhm.
it was matter of fact.
It
Like
was,
there was
yeah.
no, there's so much, I hear so much codependency in a lot of
Mhm,
and husbands as well, where they feel
mhm.
like they need to take care of everything and need to take care of them, each, of their spouse. I hear that they're like, oh, well, we're supposed to be married to get forever. I hear, oh, what about the kids? All that stuff like that. And I don't hear very few many people going, this isn't working.
Mhm,
And this is not going to work because you're not straight.
mhm.
So we need to go our separate ways.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very unusual.
I know, and
And
I
that's like in a low percentage. It's usually the wife is fighting it, or
mhm,
the husband is fighting it, or
mhm.
my ex-husband was really awful. So,
Yeah, yeah.
that did not happen for me. I had almost a 2.5 year divorce process. So
Yeah, my wife's was not easy as well. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's
So
yeah, and it's true, and I'm thankful for that, and it's like, I understand that struggle, but I know it's, like, so much harder for so many people
mhm,
to yeah, and
mhm.
I'm thankful for that for myself, because that part was at least almost easy, and I'm very, very thankful for that. But still, I mean, it still came with all the emotions
All the
of
grief of
yeah,
you guys had
yeah.
just started, you were gonna build a life together, and then all of
Mhm.
a sudden it's over.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you have to figure out what's next.
Yeah, and how does this look? And then just of course dealing with family and people going, "Well, what is going on and why?" And then the coming out process and coming out to a Catholic conservative family, and so it like those were the parts that were, you know, emotional.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
yeah, I my story has been one that's been very lucky, blessed, fortunate, however you want to look at it, because even coming out to my family, um they were my mom had an amazing reaction, and I was terrified to tell her, but she was just like, well, I love you, and nothing you can say or do will change that. But but she still had questions and
Yeah,
still had to go
yeah,
through her own process. But
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's one thing I always like to remind people, is that even though we've known this in our heads sometimes for
Yes.
decades, the people we're telling do not know this about this,
Mhm.
us. Um, and so sometimes you have to give people time. And
That's it.
sometimes people's
Absolutely.
first reaction is not their last reaction.
Mhm.
And And so a lot of times people are very impatient for people to just totally accept them. And
Yes.
sometimes you have to give people a little bit of
Yeah.
time.
I say
So
that same thing for however long it took you to figure this out, like give people some grace with
yeah.
them processing the information. And yeah, it's just because it changes everything that they've known about you. And I think sometimes even our family and friends grieve that too, especially when you're married, that has become their son-in-law that they've seen at holidays and Christmas and the father of their grandkids and and then now to just go, oh, okay, we're going our separate ways. I think there's some grieving for them too, to
Oh
process
yeah.
like
I
that
mean,
new life and that new reality of things. And so I know we just want people to always go, okay, yeah, great, wonderful, so happy for you, but it takes some time and yeah, yeah.
and also too for family, a lot of times, like my ex-husband, my family loved him. I mean,
Mhm.
so it took, and then, it took a while for them to let go,
Yeah. Yeah.
to let go. And the thing is that they also didn't know what was going on in the divorce either.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until after that I started saying, he was pretty shitty to me. And
Mhm.
that's when they started to let go. But it's hard to let go of some. I really do think we have to figure out a way to keep people in our lives and in our families when they get divorced, as long as it's not disruptive. I think that
Mhm.
a lot of people have a lot of pain over that,
Yeah.
And for example, my niece on my husband's side got married this year, and I helped raise her, and or
Mhm.
last weekend, and I wasn't invited to the wedding.
Mm.
And that stuff, you know, uh, 8 years ago when I came out, I would have been on the floor crying for
Yeah.
days. If I,
Yeah.
I was sad. I was okay. I was sad. All my children were there. I was,
Mhm.
I was sad. I was sad.
Yeah.
I let myself be sad that day, but it didn't like derail me like it
Yeah.
would at the beginning. Yeah. And like stuff like that doesn't do that anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
So Emily mentioned something at the beginning of this podcast about how when she came out 6 years ago and when I came out 8 years ago, there was nothing like this out
Mhm.
to find support. Both Emily and I work with our respective communities. We both provide support for women coming out later in life. Um, and cis, trans, and non-binary folks. And there wasn't anything there. And
Mhm.
so I always said, I want to get back to that. So when I first started, I built my first website in 2018, and, I wasn't getting any traffic, and I didn't know anything about SEO or
Yeah.
anything. Spent like a year trying to learn it. And then I'm like, I'm not going to do this. This is not what I want to do. So I hired somebody, and part of her marketing was that she went to look and see, you know, what was my competition. There were nobody on the internet
Mhm.
that called themselves coming out coaches. Nobody.
Mhm.
And so, maybe there were people that called themselves that, but that didn't have the SEO optimization that they needed. But there was nobody. And when I was
Oh, and
coming,
I scoured the internet when I was like,
yeah,
"What can I find?" Like, there's gotta be something out there, and yeah,
yeah.
really, I think I found, like, one website that
Oh,
had
and
some
I found,
stories. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I found, I think it was the same one. It was a
Mm.
late lesbian blog or something like that,
Yeah,
and
uh-huh.
that I know Andrea, she's a good friend of mine, and at the end of it, she talked about a little Facebook group she had, and
Mm,
I joined that Facebook group, and when I joined it, there was, like 180 people in it, and then when it
mhm,
disbanded a couple years ago, there was 2,400 people in it. And,
mhm.
so, finding that community was so incredibly important.
Yeah.
And finding that support after, it took me 3 tries to come out of the closet. And so it was on the 3rd time when I
Mm.
Googled life lesbian and found that support is when that gave me the courage and the strength to come out.
I think what you said right there, I know we're gonna go into these tips, but that's another one too of having that support. Like, as I've talked to so many women who've tried to come out multiple times, but
Oh,
doing it
yeah, that's true.
alone, yeah,
Yeah.
doing it alone, they've failed. I don't know if I feel like that's such a terrible word, but they just weren't able
Didn't
to
do
do
it.
it. Yeah,
It
it was too much. It got to be too much, so they took it all back. They went back in the closet and but it never goes away. Like you said, it took you 3 times, and so but when you have support, you have a safe space, it makes it easier to work through it when it gets hard. So,
Right, especially when there's people there that not only the person that's leading the community, but other people that are maybe
yeah.
just 6 months ahead of you,
Yes.
and for
That they're
those
like, "It's okay. I was right where you were. Like, you're
oh,
gonna get
oh,
there." Yeah.
the best. So Emily and I both believe like finding support is crucial, and we're going to give you some reasons why right now. Okay, the very first one, and I have experienced this, is therapists, mental health therapists often fail the community,
Mhm.
really fail the community.
Not
Um,
all, I'm gonna say that I know there's some good ones out there,
oh yeah, oh
but yeah.
absolutely. Um, so if you are somebody who are struggling with your sexuality, don't go to a Christian counselor. Please,
Mm-mm,
you're
mm-mm,
just not going to get the support. Yes, there are progressive Christians out there. I was ordained in a progressive
mhm.
Christian denomination, but most people who hang their shingle out as a Christian counselor tend to be more on the conservative side.
Yep.
And they will do a lot of work to try to help you think that this is a phase or, I
You and your husband need to connect more, like, you need to find ways to have intimacy outside the bedroom, and you need to rebuild that connection, and when that connection's there, then you'll be, you know, more ready for sex, and yeah, yeah.
Well, and what I have found is that a lot of times, even though therapists may label themselves as LGBTQ friendly, and they might be very
Mhm,
good with people who are already out and, are like going to see them about childhood stuff or
mhm,
something like
mhm.
that. I have found that they don't understand the later in life experience. So
Yep.
I'm going to give you my own personal experiences.
Okay. Yeah.
When I went to see a therapist, I went to her specifically because I wanted to talk about my sexuality. That's why I was there.
Mhm,
And her first question, she was straight, she was married to her husband. She first question out of her mouth was, "Well, have you ever been with a woman?" And
mhm.
I said no. And she never brought it up again.
Mm.
And I thought, well, I guess I failed the test.
Ugh. Ugh. I wanna piggyback off that if that's
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
And maybe we've said this, maybe we've chatted about before, but, so many people do that, and that's even a question that I get with the women that I work with that are like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to justify this when people say, 'But have you ever been with a woman before?'" And I think what's great is, okay, well, for all the people that are straight, do you ever ask them, "Well, how do you know you're straight? Have you been," like, when you were in your
Yeah,
teens and trying to figure out dating and all of that, did you ever get asked, "Well, how do you know you're straight? Have you been with a boy yet? Like, so how do you know?" But it's this inherent knowing, like, well, I like, for people who are straight, they know that they're straight, and unfortunately for us, because nobody's ever really asked those conversations, and that's the society we live in, we don't ask that question. But then when you get to that point, you can still know you're gay without ever being with somebody. In the same way you can know you're straight and never have been with somebody. So,
absolutely. And,
mhm,
I came out as queer, as gay.
mhm.
Probably, I don't know what I was at that time, but I was not straight.
Yeah.
and, and I had never been with anybody.
Yeah.
I'd never been, except for some experimentation when I was, 14. I had never
Mhm.
been with anybody. And
Yep.
so I just knew that I just needed to go. Like it was like once I let it in, I
Mhm.
needed to go and then explore this. And
Yeah.
then the second therapy story I have is my
Okay. Yeah.
husband and I were in marriage counseling
Mm.
with a lesbian therapist, by the
Mm.
way. And I didn't realize I always was okay. So the universe was always putting lesbians in my path. So, like when I did my clinical pastoral education to become a chaplain, both my mentors, supervisors were both lesbians.
Oh,
The
okay.
only other woman in my group was a lesbian. So I mean, like I was just surrounded. And then
Uh,
when I engaged this therapist, really wasn't until like a year or so in, I was like, oh, she's gay.
mm.
I just didn't even really think about it. She was really helpful. But my ex and I were seeing her as a couple. And toward the end of one session, I said, sometimes I think I might be gay.
Mhm.
She ignored it, and she chalked it up because
Mm.
of the relationship I had with my mom, which, insert
Mm.
eye roll here because almost every lesbian has heard that. And,
Mhm.
when I came out for the third time,
Yeah.
She, we had a lot of conversations around that because she still was my therapist at that point, and,
Mhm.
she apologized. But,
Mm. Okay.
mm, a lot of times when you're with a couples therapist, their goal is to save your marriage.
Yeah.
Sometimes they may ignore pieces of information that might be really, really helpful.
Mhm.
Because if someone had said that to me in the work I do now, I would
Mhm.
be all over that because
Mhm.
that would have been a very big clue. Now, my therapist was also, I was in my 40s at the time. She was probably in her early 70s. And she actually had been married to a man too,
Oh, okay.
but like came out in her late 20s,
Yeah.
back in the late 60s, and so it was really interesting because I think she also had a very traditional view of what marriage was and
Mhm.
and things like that. So if your therapist tells you it's a phase, if your therapist says they know a lot about the queer community, but when you're talking to them, you start to realize that they really don't know as much as they
Mhm.
think they do. Um,
Or it even just kind of brushing off your like what you had happen, just sort of like, oh, if you say this and they're just kind of like, okay, let's move on. That,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And so like, I highly recommend whether you work with a coach or therapist to make sure that they are very LGBTQ friendly and even maybe LGBTQ themselves.
Yeah.
But really ask them, have you ever worked with anybody who's come out later in life?
I think that
Because
that's huge because if they don't
that's
have
like the number one
experience with
question.
that, they're just not going to get it. Yeah, and they may be a wonderful therapist for other reasons, but if they just don't have the experience of working with this, there's just probably a lot that's going to get missed.
Well, and also too, like I've had clients say, "Oh, my therapist won't talk to this with me. That's why I'm coming to see you." Just
Mm.
every time I try to talk to her or him about this, she just wants to talk about my childhood. And I want to talk about this because it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
important to me right now. And so
Mhm.
there are a lot of people that also specialize in doing this. But really finding support, no matter who you choose to find support,
Mhm.
you need your person for
Yeah.
this. You
Yes.
need it. Find the money. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Find people that may take sliding scale, but you need to find your support. Don't the internet's great.
Yeah.
Facebook groups are great. All those things are great. Emily's group's great. My group is great, but you really need someone you can talk to one-on-one with. You really
Mhm. Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So we really believe in having support from people who've been there. So talk to me about your community and how they support each other.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. I was like, wait a second, where do I start with this? Yeah, so the community that I run, I feel like I is more than like your typical Facebook group. It's on its own platform. And there's more support available in there where you kind of have the same sort of setup where you can go in and talk and share and make posts and comment and things like that. But we also do a weekly group Zoom call. And we alternate that between just sort of a general open forum support group, come on, share, talk with others, just know you're not alone and there's other women right here with you. And it's really great because a lot of times the women jump in and do shit, like if one woman's, a few little bit ahead than the other or whatever, that they jump in and they do support each other, which is great. And I always facilitate those meetings too so I can kind of offer insight and guidance, of things to prepare for, how to process what's going on. And then I also do a call where we really do focus on processing what's going on. There's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of heaviness, and so then that other call is to dive deeper into that kind of emotional processing, that well-being, taking care of yourself, and yeah, working through all of the real big feelings that come with this. And then yeah, there's also an opportunity, there's a group chat in there where I'm a part of it and women can reach out, directly to me if they need to 7 days a week. They can talk to others and share. And I love it. It's great. They'll come in, some will share happy things. Somebody recently just shared, okay, I did it. I told my husband I need a divorce. And women are jumping in and telling her, that she did a great job and that's great that she's prioritizing herself. And she even says something about is am I wrong for feeling relieved, and that validation and that like encouragement. No, you're not wrong for feeling relieved. Like that's a sign that this was the right decision for you. And yeah, so some of the other things that we had talked about being benefits of support are that validation and the normalization of what people are going through. And that's something that, is found in the community that I run, where you can be validated in your experiences, and what you're going through is normalized. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, how well-run communities are run.
Mhm.
Our community runs pretty much the same way.
Oh,
Um,
awesome. Yeah.
and we do mutual support groups twice a week. And we sometimes they're topic based, sometimes we
Mhm.
do what I call as a check-in, where everybody just talks about what's going on. I have facilitated these long enough. I've been facilitating small groups since 2006,
Oh,
way
wow.
before I did this.
Yeah.
So, and like I can hear people saying, and then I'm like, oh, this is a good topic for the general discussion right now.
Mhm.
So we'll start talking about that. If you're going to work with a support group, make sure that your facilitator is going to keep the group safe. Make sure
Mhm.
she mentions things like confidentiality,
Yep.
about like people are always apologizing for taking up space. And I said, that's my job to take care of. If you're taking up too much space, I'll let you know.
Yep.
Because sometimes people do, but I also notice women always apologize for taking up space. And a lot of times they're talking for like 1 second or 1 minute and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, talk, it's okay. Uh, and other things too is like, no side chats, like, that if you see people in group chat talking, not what's on the topic, but talking
Mhm.
about something completely on the side, that's sort of like crosstalk. I use the model that AA uses and Al-Anon uses.
Mm.
That's a really good way to run a mutual support group. So make sure,
Mhm.
and like, if you're in a mutual support group and someone gets called out or gets embarrassed and the facilitator does nothing to do with it, and, and making sure people are like, one of the rules in my group is you ask if somebody wants, uh, uh, ask if somebody wants advice before you give it.
Mm,
Another
mhm.
rule we have is I ask everyone to speak in I language, because I language is really important, because all the advice we ever give anybody comes from our own experience. So
Mhm.
it's a lot easier to hear, Emily, when this happened to me, this is what I did,
Yeah.
versus Emily, you know what you should do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I always really, really encourage I language, because that's like one of the most important things. And to keep people feeling safe, because a lot of people
Mhm.
get really nervous around groups. And so a lot of times I'll have reluctant group members who end up loving the group,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
had a really good experience at um, uh, before. So you spoke about validation and normalization of this
Mhm.
process. And we're going to talk about, if you're in your first relationship with somebody,
Mhm.
why your own individual support is so important. Do you want to
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I know a lot of women going through this can one develop a relationship with a catalyst who was a woman that they met and was sort of the spark of this realization. And sometimes those relationships carry on, or even if you've kind of worked through this somewhat and you're jumping into dating and you have your first relationship with a woman. Super exciting, super great, all the feels and the good stuff. But especially if this is your catalyst, or your first relationship, you can still be processing through a lot of what has happened in your life and this separation from your male partner, and still even potentially figuring out how all of that looks. And with grief, with any type of grief, it takes time to really truly heal, and there can be moments that pop up that trigger you, and kind of push that grief button and can make you sad. And so sometimes if you're in a relationship with somebody, your catalyst or a new relationship, and you're sharing this, it can be a lot for that person to take. If you don't have another space to find support, to find validation, to share some of these thoughts and feelings, and especially if you get to a moment, because I'll share this too for myself. I absolutely, I knew that separation, divorce was the right thing to do, but I had moments in the year, beginning years after, where I something would happen And I would just break down crying because just something triggered me and triggered the fact that my life wasn't what it used to be. And not that I regretted that or anything, but it's just emotional.
Just
And if
because
you're oh, go ahead.
just because you mourn your old life doesn't mean you want it back. You're just,
Absolutely.
you know, and a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, I made a mistake." I'm like, "No, you're just mourning your old life. It'll
Yeah.
be okay. This is a temporary moment, right?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And I always knew I never made the mistake, but I was just really sad at times. Like, I think our first Christmas apart was hard, and we still got together with our son and we did Christmas, but I think after I left, I came home and I just cried because yeah, it was just different. And it's okay and it's great and we, get along, but so anyways, going back to like the point being, if you're in a relationship with somebody and they're the only person you're relying on to help you through those hard moments, that can put a lot of stress and strain and pressure on that person, and that can be a lot for them to go through. So having your own support that you can really just share what you're going through and work through some of that, without putting all of it on your partner. Not saying hide these things from your partner, that's not healthy either, but to know that you have a safe space to open up with, again, people who understand what you're going through. And yeah, I don't know if you want to
I
add to
had
that.
my own experience because I started dating my wife, and my only support group was that Facebook group, which we met
Mhm.
each other in. And at the time, I was like, "Oh God, I can't talk about this relationship because she's in here."
Yeah.
And so for a while when I was running my groups, I would say, "Is your, that I want to have my girlfriend come in." And I always say to people, "This is your space. And if she
Mhm.
comes in and something happens, then you don't have a place." And some of people were really grateful and they're like, "Oh God, I never thought of that."
Mhm.
And so, that was one of the things that I did because I had other things I could talk to the group about, but here I was navigating my first queer relationship that I'd ever been in, and I had nobody to talk to.
That's a great point too. Just to even have a space where you can talk about the relationship
Relationship,
because
because
it's
I
yeah.
had a million questions,
Yeah.
and my wife, she's now my wife, she had I was telling Emily before we recorded, like, she had to be this is the thing, is when you are coming out of the straight world, we're used to treating women that we're close to as our best friends, and we tell
Mm,
things.
mhm,
And this is the difference. She is not your best friend, she is your girlfriend.
mhm,
And you have to be really thoughtful about what you're telling her because it may be just like Emily said, it's too much. In fact, Tanda and I wrote a couple articles about this because it was too much for her.
mhm,
And I also find too, is that people meet these wonderful women
mhm.
and then it gets hard, and the first thing to go is the last thing that came. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times they throw out some really great relationships, and so what I will always like to remind people is that this is your lover and your
Mhm,
girlfriend. And if you can't, ask yourself, would I tell my boyfriend this? Because
mhm.
that's really our frame of reference that we have when we're new. Would you tell your boyfriend that you're dating this about all about your ex-husband?
Yeah, yeah.
Probably not. You wouldn't. And so that is why we really both really believe that having community where you can come and talk about everything that's going on, but also like I'm navigating my first girl relationship. How do I do this? You
Mhm,
know?
mhm.
So a lot of times people don't seek support. And then to piggyback on that, so if you're two women who have fallen in love with each other, and you're both leaving spouses, or one of you sort of out and one of you's not out, and you're very, very isolated. A lot of times you are like in your love phase, you're so in love, everything is wonderful, and then you break up, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden people talk about the end of their first lesbian relationship, catalyst relationship, I call it confirmer relationships, because
Mhm.
like both Emily and I came out knowing that we were not straight and we were trying to figure it all out. um, and so a lot of times I just lost my train of thought, we'll have to cut this here. What was I
Um, Well, you were talking about, I think when that first relationship ends.
Okay.
And yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, let's say, and this first relationship ends and you have nobody, like
Mhm,
nobody who understands this. Like
mhm.
you might have your spouse, you may have, some straight friends, but a
Yeah.
lot of times straight friends don't give the weight of a breakup, especially a first queer breakup.
I was gonna say, I was if you don't mind, but yeah, don't mind me jumping in, that your first queer breakup is like the equivalent, like, and I don't know if you can go back and remember, but the very, very first heartbreak that you ever had. And those are usually the hardest, most painful ones. Like when you thought that you found your person and maybe you were a teenager even, but you had that heartbreak. And then sometimes even for people, they've never even had that experience, yeah, where they had that first heartbreak because maybe you've actually never been that invested in somebody due to not really living as your true self. So when you have that first real, genuine, deep heartbreak, it it's just hard. And if you don't have somebody in a place that understands that. And again, you might try to talk to your straight friends, but they're so far removed from that experience, like maybe they even did have that, but they just can't relate to that anymore because they just don't they're at a different place in their life.
There
Yeah.
and sometimes they can be slightly disapproving as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say, "Well, don't lesbians break up all the time?" I mean, like,
Mhm.
there's not much grace for your pain, and so
Yeah.
what ends up happening is also too, for someone who's really new,
Mhm.
often our identity as being a queer person is tied to the catalyst or the confirmer or that first
Mhm.
relationship. And so developing your identity. And I remember when I was dating my wife, I was like, and when I was, I was thinking about a bunch of different things. And I remember, and she knows all this, by the way, so
Mhm.
I'm not sharing anything she doesn't know. But I was like, I was like, if I break, like, because I was thinking, should I date other women and stuff like that? I remember saying to myself, if I break up with her, I don't have much of identity developed yet
Mm.
because I
Mhm.
saw this in the groups. And so I just don't think I can do that yet.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just don't think that's something I should do. I mean, our relationship was fine, but I was having all the usual questions people have is like, oh, shouldn't I date more people? Should I, all which is really
Mhm.
normal. Everybody does that. Um, so that's why I'm also a really big believer. Don't isolate yourself with your first girlfriend. Make
Mhm.
yourself go out, maybe as a couple, try to find community on your own. And what are some ways that you would advise people to find community?
Thankfully now, I mean, there is so much more online. I mean, we have our places. I think it is easier to find
Support.
some of those places. I mean, Facebook groups. I mean, but here's the deal too. This is why I moved off of Facebook and I have my community on my own platform. Some women aren't in a place where, like, even though you can join a private Facebook group, they just are so scared that somebody's going to see or find out that they are in that group.
I've
Yeah.
weighed that back and forth, but where
Mhm.
I came on that is that a lot of times they're just so upset that they don't have the brain power to
Mm.
learn to navigate a new platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why I've stayed on Facebook, but I always tell people just make a fake profile.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
tell me who you are and I'll let you in,
Uh-huh.
and
Yep.
people do that. They
Yep,
do
and I
it.
would say I think I've had people do that, like, reach out to me on Instagram with, like, fake profiles or made up ones, just so that they have a safe space. But yeah, I mean, that's great too. There's a piece too. You can hide your identity with a fake profile,
No, I know it doesn't sound very ethical for the
it
people but
yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's
And I tell that too. I'm like, I am so much a firm believer in living your truth, being honest, sharing that. Like this journey has taught me this too. The truth will set you free is absolutely it's so applicable to this. Like once you finally are able to go through this, you will feel a freedom that you've never felt in your life. But you have to get there in your own time. And if that requires a fake profile and some discretion and doing this at your own pace, it's okay as long as you're taking those steps to get what you need because you don't have to suffer through this alone. So, yeah.
And,
Um,
and a tiny step a day. And a tiny step, by the way, can be making a fake profile so you can join a support group.
yeah.
And it's just a step. Eventually, what will happen is most people, like I have seen in my groups, they're like, I'm ready to be with my regular profile now.
Yep.
And then they just make an announcement in the group and say, hey,
Mhm.
I've been so and so in here. I'm actually, this is my real profile now. And then a lot of
Mhm.
times they get celebrated
Yeah. Yeah.
because they just don't, they've moved on. Uh,
Mhm. Yeah, but, there's podcasts. I mean, I know that like yours is a great option. I mean, finding podcasts, there's books, that people have
your
written. There's
YouTube channel, you have a
yeah.
YouTube that talks.
Mhm.
Um,
YouTube, I think, is a great place. I've heard multiple people, like more people are sharing their stories and experiences on YouTube that have gotten through this. TikTok, for some reason, seems to be a,
TikTok made me gay, don't you know that?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Um,
there's some hot young butches on there that make me laugh because
yeah.
they're cute, but I feel
Yeah.
like their mom. So
Oh, I see lots of comments on that where women are like, "Am I gay?" Because yeah, after watching, yeah, this is
there's
making me
yeah,
question things. But
but there is a
all
whole
joking aside, yeah,
but it's a real robust lesbian community on there,
yeah.
and you can find a lot of community on.
Mhm.
You can find I find with TikTok, I consider the TikTok the Wild West of social
Yeah.
media platforms. You can find a lot of people to follow. I don't know
Mhm.
how much community you can find on there,
I
like,
was gonna say that's probably one of those stepping stones of at
yeah,
least seeing other people out there to go, okay, wait, there are other people that exist out there that are going through some similar things. But yeah, like the genuine community of finding yeah, yeah, and I would, like you mentioned too, I would really recommend finding a community that is, like, well run, that is structured, that has, like, support groups that are led and facilitated by, people that have experience,
mhm, mhm.
yeah, yeah.
And then, like, locally, I'm gonna make some recommendations. Softball is the gateway sport to lesbianism. Join a softball group. I mean, if you're a sporty gay, there's lots of LGBTQ groups out there, but there are honestly, my wife found her first community in her first softball team,
That's
40
awesome.
years ago. There's a lot of other sports. If you're older, pickleball is a big lesbian sport. Kayaking is huge among the lesbian community. You can find the lesbians on the water.
Mhm,
But beyond that, you can join just local meetups
mhm,
where people, and just look. I mean,
yeah.
like there's and also
Some
too, like if you're further along, you can join business things, you can join the LGBTQ business thing. If you're a professional,
mhm.
a lot of professional organizations have LGBTQ. That's often when you get further down the journey.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
It might be harder to find local groups that are really specific to this, like, late life
experience.
journey. Yeah, I was like, that's still gonna be a little bit trickier where I'd say if you're in that sort of messy middle navigating all of that, you might be better off like, with the supports that Anne-Marie or I offer because they're so much more specialized to getting you through
Right,
that.
right.
But if you're like, and again, you have to be ready. I'm ready to find local community. I'm ready to go to meetup groups. And then, but yeah, there are typically local LGBTQ organizations that do meetups, that have events, just your local pride. There's usually, yeah, yeah.
Or your face, and also too, a lot of times you can look on Facebook in the chat,
Mhm.
I mean, in the search bar and just say Toledo LGBTQ group and see if
Yeah.
there are any, because they will pop up and stuff like
Hmm.
that. And again, you can also use a profile that's not, that's fake. And as long as you tell the admin and say, hey, I'm just coming out and I'm nervous, almost night you will always find an ass now and then, but 90% of all people get it,
Yeah.
because that's the one thing we've all done is
And
we've
if
come.
somebody is kind of a jerk about it, then I would
You don't
not
want to
join
be
that
in that.
group
Yeah, I
because
wouldn't be
if
in that.
that's what you got, then they're not going to be the person that's going
Supportive.
to understand and validate what you're going through. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, Emily, can I ask you, did you have a coming out song?
Oh, coming out song? Um, This Is Me, The Greatest Showman. I ended up watching that musical shortly after I came out. I actually even dated a girl that like played it. She's like, you just really need to listen to this. And so I guess I kind of stole it from her, but I was like, it really resonated with me
That's one of
after I heard it. Yeah.
that's one of mine. Did you see the YouTube video where they're in rehearsal and doing it?
No.
Oh, I'm gonna send that to you after.
Okay,
That
yeah.
will make
Yeah.
you cry.
Oh,
Hugh Jackman starts crying because, by the way, he just came out as gay.
I
But he,
saw that too. I was like, wow, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
every gay man I knew was like, when is he gonna come out?
So funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a thing too. I'm hoping like Sophia Bush that just came out is queer, and is doing so much for like this representation. I'm hoping that the more and more of that we see, just again, the more of this stuff that happens, the more this process will become normalized. And
Yes.
so,
That
yeah.
was one of my goals in 2018
Hmm.
because I heard so many women in those groups being like ashamed that they came out
Yeah.
later in life. And I'm gonna swear here, I was like, fuck that. I am not gonna be ashamed that I came out later
Hmm.
in life. I
Hmm.
just am not. That I don't have the energy or the time for that. I'm glad I'm here. And if you have a problem with my timeline, then that's your problem. That's
Yeah.
not. And so that's one of the reasons. And like when I started doing like all the stuff, all the content and all that stuff, I just wanted to normalize this process because it's very normal. You and I have talked, we've met each other like 3 weeks ago, and
Hmm.
like we're speaking the same language, even though
Hmm.
we haven't really known of each other, we're
Yeah.
speaking the same language and we're saying the same things.
Yep.
Absolute things. So guess what that means, folks? It means there's a lot of normal things about this project, about this process that
Yep.
Emily and I have just discovered on our own, and now we're collaborating, and there it's normal. There's parts of
Hmm.
this that are really normal. So
Hmm.
did you have a book or a movie that changed your life?
I didn't really. I mean, I think of like TV shows I would get into that always had some type of like bi or lesbian characters or
Line?
yeah, yeah, and I'd always get like super into that and but nothing really that was part of like my coming out. But yeah, just like I remember watching Orange is the New Black and 100% rooting for the lesbian couple versus the straight couple and yeah, and, like as toxic as it was, I'm like, oh, this is just so much better. Yeah.
So how would you describe your life today?
Oh, just amazing. I'm so thankful, like so at peace, um just so content, like in a way that I didn't know it was possible. Like I thought I had a really good, happy, peaceful, content life and that, I had a fun life, but the level of internal peace and contentness and just freedom that I feel after going through this and embracing who I am. Like I said, the truth will set you free. Like I very much so share my truth, my whole truth, and my family knows, and my ex-in-laws know, and I just have nothing to hide, and the level of peace that I can operate in with that is just like indescribable. Like I struggle to find the words to say like how content I am
Well,
just being me. Yeah.
it's authenticity.
Mhm.
What you describe is like to me, I still like reflect. My life is very different,
Mhm.
and in a lot of ways a lot quieter. And I think that's also due to my children growing up and stuff like that. I was
Yeah.
busy, I had 4 kids. I was really busy. And it's quieter, and it really even still surprises me like how content I am.
Mhm.
Like, I am very content with my life. I have no
Mhm.
desire to go find anything else. I don't want to date anybody or be with anybody
Yeah.
else. I'm just content. And after being somebody who had a missing piece and was constantly searching for, I think, I thought it was happiness, but I think it was contentment.
Mhm.
I was kept searching for that. And so now finally to have it, it is really wonderful to have. And I think
Mhm.
like it's more like more contentment and peace. And we're gonna have ups and downs and all that stuff.
Yeah. Have good days, have bad days, you know,
Yeah,
and yeah, but
it's
it's
not like we're running around with unicorns and, bunnies all the time.
yeah.
It rainbows, but I feel it makes this journey also has equipped me to have more compassion when I'm going through harder times in my life
Mhm. Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah. Yes. No, I agree. I was going to say something that you were talking about with that, but it's that authenticity, that authentic self, that true self. It's a peace within your own skin, like that you are content within your own body, like within your own soul. You know, yeah, we still have the human experience. I'm getting a little spiritual here, but we still have the human experience of life and the ups and downs and bad days and things that make us mad or whatever. But it's not this internal restlessness.
Right.
It's this contentness with just with yourself and your being. And that's something that I didn't even know really until I went through all of this, like what this could feel like. So yeah. hmm
How can people find you?
um my website, thelatelifelesbian.com, and then all my social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, um at the Late Life Lesbian. So
You know what
yeah.
I think is really interesting about you, Emily, is you started posting about this journey like when you were like a brand old
Yeah.
newbie. And so now there's all these videos up of you when you were just like clueless.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is really nice. Do you ever go back? Last question. Do you ever go back and look at them?
I haven't. No. I
Yeah.
probably should go back and watch
Just
some of
look
the
at
things.
like
Yeah.
one or two of them or read the transcript or something so you can, because I remember like in the that Facebook group that I was in was archived. So you can still go back and look
Mm-hmm.
at, and I've gone back and looked at some of my posts and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just on the topic of this, like finding support, my YouTube channel was like my own support because it was
Right.
it was like my own therapy because I was doing it of going, I can't be the only one. So I'm just going to start sharing it. And that's what led people to come to me and go, "Oh my gosh, like I'm going through this too." And so all of that gave me that validation. It normalized what I was going through and it really helped me process through that and connect with other people. So, but yeah, it very very different in the beginning of what it was versus, yeah, the content I post on there now. So
Well, thank you so much for the work you do. It's
oh,
really, really
you
important.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
thank
too.
you. I mean, this is a hard journey. Don't do it alone. Emily and I are here to help you. There's other people out there to help you if we're not a good fit for you. But
Mhm.
our number one takeaway from today is don't do this alone. Find the
Yep,
money, get the support you need. There's lots of good communities out there, but don't do this alone.
yep, yep.
All righty. See you soon.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA plus stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.